this leads on from, after you have been diagnosed. I feel like for me, it took 13 years for me to get diagnosed, and I was a little bit like Renee, quite happy to have a diagnosis. But then, there's that minute, that hour, that day of, yes, I've got a diagnosis. And then all of a sudden there's that crash of, what does this mean and what next? And that fear and anxiety around, what's this going to look like for my future? So I guess it would just be interesting to hear your perspective on how people, or what people can do to try and not be overcome by those feelings of anxiety and fear around what is going to happen to me now.
Okay. And that's a big anxiety and fear. Okay. So it's valid to have it. It's about how you manage it, I suppose. What control you do have on it and what control you don't have on it. I usually ask people, what exactly are they fearful of? What exactly are they anxious about? Because some people might say, oh, just not being able to work, go to that point. Some people might go dying, go to that point. Some people might go, how I die, what is it, what around it. Some people might do my family and what's going to happen to them. So knowing exactly what your biggest fear and anxiety is about, I think is really important. And then looking at ways of being able to manage the anticipatory fear and anxiety, like having things in place, like, for example, some person worried about their will, having things in, their children, having things in place like a good will, knowing what, having good insurance policy, knowing what you can do, knowing what they can do, can cause a lot of that sort of anticipatory stuff to sort of calm down a little bit. Knowing about being worried about something even, right to the end of life, what are they scared of? Having that in place, knowing what they can put in place to make things as easy as possible. That's sort of like long-term anticipatory fears. Day-to-day living, as opposed to living in the future-orientated space, because anxiety and fear are usually future-orientated. They're not day-to-day. So focusing on helping them being in the moment, in the day, noticing what's happening in the here and now, as opposed to what's going to happen in the future. And just trying to use some mindfulness-based practices to do that. And just being able to plan and take as much control as you can. Look at what you can do as opposed to what you can't do. And there's good models out there. I mean, we just had the Disability Olympics, Disabled Olympics. How many people did so many things that nobody would have thought they could do? You got Stephen Hawkins. I mean, the brain is such an incredible creative organ. That's something that's there and you can use the rest of your life. Look at the things you can do as opposed to the things you can't do.
I really like that, because I think that's one of the big things, particularly for me and other patients that I've talked with, Pompe. It's that that loss of control, and that's really frustrating. And because you're losing physical control, if you ask my partner, he'd probably say now I'm really controlling in other ways to try and get some of that back. But I think that's a really interesting point, that, yeah, just focusing on the here and now, because otherwise it can be so overwhelming. Definitely.
Definitely. Yeah. Makes perfect sense. Yeah.